Hi, this is Kent here from Berkshire Running Center. I am here today to talk to you about PF, the big PF, Plantar Fasciitis. I will preface this by saying that I have absolutely no medical experience whatsoever. So if you're looking for medical recommendations, this is not the place to get them. I'm giving you a runner's recommendation from a runner who's dealt with this issue not once, but twice and successfully cured it and come back from it. So what is plantar fasciitis? It is an inflammation of the plantar fascia. The plantar fascia is that thick, fibrous tendon that runs along the bottom of the foot that forms the arch. And how can it become inflamed? Overuse. I think in my case, the first time, it was a combination of overuse and the wrong shoe. I didn't know any better. I didn't own a run specialty store back then. And I bought cheap shoes, and they were the wrong shoe for me. And my buddy kept saying when I was running with him, "I hear your foot slapping, I hear your foot slapping." I didn't hear it, and shortly I developed this problem with my heel, and I had it for a year and a half. First of all, I got improperly diagnosed by a podiatrist, told me it was a heel bone spur, and not to think anything more of it. That's what it was. And then I got it correctly diagnosed, and it was plantar fasciitis, and I had to treat it. And most common things to treat plantar fasciitis. First of all, let's say, how do I know if it's plantar fasciitis? And I will say, if it acts and feels like plantar fasciitis, it probably is. If it doesn't, it probably isn't. So typical, very typical symptoms of PF are you wake up in the morning and you go to take that first step out of bed. Usually it's on one foot. You don't usually have it on both feet at the same time. And that very first step, pretty painful, and you're kind of walking around on your tippy toes for a while. And as you get moving a little bit, the tendon gets warmed up and it starts to feel a little bit better. Eventually you can kind of walk somewhat normal with your whole foot on the floor, and you're moving around. It starts to feel okay. You kind of forget about it. You know it's there a little bit. Usually you can run on it. Like that first mile, it's a little stiff, but once you get through that first mile, it starts to loosen up and feels much better. But if you sit down and you let that cool down and let that tendon cool off, you get back up again, and ooh, it's right there again. It reminds you it's still there. That tendinitis has not gone away. You've just warmed it up. Once it's warm, it typically feels better, and once it cools down, it typically feels much worse. That's your typical plantar fasciitis. If it hurts you all the time, that's probably not plantar fasciitis. If it gets much worse as you're running on it and using it, it's probably not plantar fasciitis. It might be a tear, might be a bone spur, might be something else. But I'm talking about your typical classic PF. So the way that I've treated it successfully a couple of times is I started off by getting something in my shoes to support my arch. So here at Berkshire Running Center, we sell Superfeet, which is a really rigid arch support. We'll match it up to your foot. So we'll fit your foot first, and then we'll trim it to fit it in your shoe. That's the way these are meant to be used. And the reason for that is because we're on our feet all day, right? So if you're on your foot all day, you're constantly putting a little bit of pressure on that plantar fascia, and it's never getting a chance to rest or heal. So this insert will kind of support it fully. And so while you're on it during the day, it's going to give it a little bit of rest and not make that arch be expanding and contracting all day long. The second thing we do is typically when we go to bed at night, we get one of these night splints. We sell these here at Berkshire Running Center also. These are from ProTech, and they just hold your foot in a nice flexed position. Sometimes difficult to get through the night sleeping, at least the first night. For me, it took a couple nights where I could wear this thing through the whole night. But after I got used to it, wake up in the morning, not tiptoeing around. Feels much better to start the day off. Always a good sign. We also are huge fans of compression. So here we have a plantar fasciitis sleeve from Zensa that we sell here at Berkshire Running Center. Again, these are sized differently based on your foot size. And compression has always been a great thing for relieving any type of tendinitis. So my typical routine when I had plantar fasciitis was I would sleep in the night boot. So we'll start at nighttime. I'd go to bed and I'd put the night boot on and I'd sleep in that. I'd get up in the morning. Actually, before I got out of bed, I'd take the boot off and I'd typically stretch. So anything on the back of the legs, hamstrings, calves, glutes, anything that's tight is going to pull on that PF. Those big muscles, if they're tight, they're going to pull on that weak spot down on the bottom. So if you get a chance to stretch while you're warm, before you get out from under the covers, that's what I would do. And then I'd get out from under the covers, and I typically wouldn't have to limp after a few days of wearing that night boot. And I'd go about my day, and I'd put my compression sleeve on. Up until the time I went to work out, I'd take the compression sleeve off and I'd run. And then, I could feel it a little bit on the run, but it usually got better during the run. And as soon as I was done with the run, I would take and ice it. So I'd get a bowl of water and I'd put some ice cubes in it and I'd stick my whole foot in there for about 15 minutes, dry it off, shower, whatever I need to do. Actually, I skipped a step. After you're done with the run, I stretched first, again, because I was nice and warm. Then I would ice it. And then I would put that compression sleeve back on and wear it the rest of the day until I went to bed, and I'd put the boot back on. So I repeated this cycle every single day without missing a beat. And it probably took a good 2 to 3 weeks before that PF got to a point where I wasn't even really sure if I had it anymore. Slowly I started to wean off of one thing after another and testing to see, if I had in fact gotten rid of the inflammation, and until I could eventually get back to not doing all of that stuff, which is where I'm at again. So again, I had this happen to me about 3 years after I started running, and it went away. I had it for about 1.5 years. And then after about 2 or 3 months, I got completely rid of it once I knew what it was and started treating it. Didn't come back again for about 10 years. And then I got it a little bit in one side, and I kind of knew I had it. Wasn't really treating it too seriously because it really wasn't that bad. And then it turned into an actual partial tear on my plantar fascia, so I had to heal that up. Took about 6 weeks of healing that up. And then I still had the tendonitis. That's how persistent that is. So I healed the tear, still had the tendonitis. It took me about another 3 months of consistent doing what I just told you about every day to get rid of that tendonitis. So I've now been probably 1.5 years, maybe a little bit more, without having that plantar fasciitis. So it can be treated, it can be fixed, it can be cured. We got to make sure we pay attention to shoes, make sure we pay attention to inserts, do our stretching, do our icing, and just treat it like it's a prescription. You can't stop halfway through the treatment. You can't stop until you've completely beaten it. It's been an ancient history, ancient memory for weeks, and then you can slowly stop doing some of those treatments and get back to your normal everyday life. So I hope this helps you. I hope you stayed with me through the whole thing. And if you have any questions, you know where to find us here at Berkshire Running Center. Have a great day.